Okay, hello everyone. Welcome to our first Fulbright Friday. We are so excited to have you here today. I know it's a busy time in the semester, but we will be talking about the English Teaching Assistant Grant for all majors and careers. If you're interested in the Fulbright ETA grants, you are in the right place. If you're interested in something like a study research, or maybe you're just looking at your options, you're welcome to stay. But today's presentation will be focused specifically on all things English teaching assistant and some of the frequently asked questions that we get regarding this grant type. My name is Katie Salgado. I'm one of the program managers within ONSA. I'm the primary advisor for ETA. I also did my Fulbright ETA grant in 2016 to Portugal, which was amazing. And so now I get to come back and help students with their applications, which is my favorite part. So today's session is going to be pretty straightforward. We're going to have about an hour. I'm going to chat with you all a little bit about the Fulbright program, kind of review some of the criteria, the ETA, what they're looking for, and kind of the purpose of the Fulbright program. And then we will get into our alumni. We're here with Wen, who went to Mongolia on her ETA. So we're going to be very excited to hear stories, and you'll be able to ask a lot of questions and chat with the group about that. If you have any questions as the presentation is going forward, feel free to throw it in the chat. We'll try and either pause if we can answer it directly. Kai, my lovely colleague, will also be in the chat answering some of the more basic questions as well. So feel free to, this is kind of open forum, throw it in the chat, and we're just so happy that you're here. So thanks for joining. Okay. So we always like to review this part just in case you missed Fulbright Day. Fulbright is an amazing program offered by the State Department. It was created in 1946 by Congress, so it's actually a bilateral grant. And its mission is to foster mutual understanding between nations. So what does that mean, right? It's an exchange program, which means we have students from the US who go over to other countries, but also, as you know, the US, we host a lot of Fulbrighters. So ASU is one of like the top producing schools for Fulbrighters, sending them off, but we also host a lot of international Fulbrighters, which is really, really cool. So most of the grants are anywhere from 9 to 12 months, so an academic year. There's about 2,000 that are awarded each year, and there's 4 types of awards available. But today we're just going to be talking about the ETA. And the best part about Fulbright is the awards provide full financial support for travel, housing, and other related costs. So if you win a Fulbright, you're completely covered on all things housing. You get your own stipend. We can talk a little bit about that later, but it's a comfortable student lifestyle, which is really cool. Okay, so when I mentioned the 4 types, these are the award types. You have the ETA, the Open Study Research, the Graduate Degree Award, Creative and Performing Arts if you're artistic, and other country-specific awards. But like I said, we're just going to be looking at the ETA awards. It's really open to all majors, which is why we have this title, open to all majors and careers. And that's the best part, right? Is figuring out which grant is right for you, depending on what your goals are. So the Fulbright ETA Awards, they provide standard Fulbright benefits specifically for just ETAs. It's one academic year. Most of the time it starts in the fall, but there are a few programs that will start on the calendar year. There's a few programs in South America, for example, that will start in December or January rather than the September, October that you might be used to. So all of that kind of depends on the country to which you apply. Just also remember that you can only apply to one country and one grant type. So as if you're thinking about multiple award types or multiple countries, eventually you will have to narrow down that decision to one and one, right? So if you want to do an ETA to Ghana or study research to Switzerland, whatever that might be, right? But most of us are in the exploratory phase. So even if you're between grants, that's okay. You're here to learn, and we're here to help you kind of figure that out. So for ETAs, you'll be helping teach English language and culture. It's about 20 to 25 hours of teaching, and then another 20 hours of community engagement that's entirely of your design. The foreign language proficiency is going to vary widely by country. So each of the different country have program summaries, and they'll tell you directly if it's required that you speak a foreign language, if it's recommended, or if it's not required at all. During Fulbright Day, we actually got a really good question about the standardization. Like, are you given a curriculum to teach, or how does that work? And the biggest thing about the Fulbright ETA is that you are there to assist, right? So you are often placed in a classroom with another teacher that's already embedded in the classroom. And most of the time, they already have a lot of things planned out. However, there is a TESOL certification that you get as well. Many of the countries will give you kind of like a TESOL boot camp so that you're familiar with, more formal modes of teaching and curriculum and content delivery, which is great. Which is also why it's open to a lot of majors and different career tracks, right? Because they recognize that teachers come in many forms, and there's a lot of transferable skills with your academic training and also how you teach. So it's not something that it's like they have a Fulbright curriculum that's standardized across and you just go and deliver it. It's not that at all. In fact, I would say the ETA award, you're more of a cultural ambassador. You're there to learn. You're there to learn from other teachers, be a support system in country, and really represent the U.S. Well in that way. I loved what one of our Fulbright alumni said is like, you're there to be a sponge, which is so true. I'm sure Wen can also speak to that a little bit more at the end of the session. So this is some questions to consider when especially if you're between a couple of different grants, or you're not sure if Fulbright is, right for you, or if you're thinking about applying this cycle. Some questions to consider that I think might be helpful is, what skills do I already have, right? Maybe you have a lot of teaching skills, or maybe you're a coach or a mentor. All of those things kind of come into play. Which skills do I hope to develop further, and why? And which grant will allow me to simultaneously use and develop these skills for my desired future, right? So we have like business majors, for example. I've worked with many a supply chain major, and when they sit down and I ask them, what skills do you already have? They're like, well, I'm a mentor for this. I also coach basketball. I do X, Y, and Z. And I go, well, it sounds like you have a lot of teaching experience. And they're like, oh yeah, I guess you're right. And I think just sitting down and kind of taking inventory of the skills that you already have is going to be very helpful. Which is figuring out which grant, if you want to do graduate study, are you wanting to go to school just because that seems like the natural next step for you? Or, are you wanting to gain a different skill set, do some more community-centered work, in which case an ETA might be a better fit than something like a graduate degree award or an independent study research, right? So we really encourage you, feel free to screenshot or take a photo or anything of these questions and really sit down and think with them later, because I do say that the hardest part about Fulbright is choosing your country and choosing your grants. Because once you know which track you're on, then you're free. The rest is just about a matter of getting your application materials together, and obviously ONSA is here to help. But I think that first step is really thinking, the first domino to fall is like, what do I want my next year to look like after graduation? Or what do I want, if you're working currently, right? What do I want my next career step to be if I want to take a year and do an ETA? Right. So we get students at all points in their career applying to ETA, which is very exciting. Recent grads, alumni, folks who have been working for a couple of years. So no matter what stage you are in your career path, we are here to support you and hopefully have that conversation of how ETA can help support those as well. But really the main takeaway here is the goal of Fulbright is mutual understanding through cultural exchange. So no matter what doubts you might have about what it means to be a teacher or how much teaching experience you have, really what they're looking for are people who are interested in being a part of the community, being embedded, whatever that looks like, with your skills, with whether it's academic or your hobbies or anything, right? They want someone who's really willing to jump in with 2 feet and be open and curious, no matter how much exposure they have to that country previously, right? We've had Fulbrighters who have visited the country before. Maybe they have a heritage connection. Maybe they've done some language study, which is great. But we've also had a ton of Fulbrighters who have never gone to that country before, right? But they still make a very compelling case for their curiosity, what they can bring and contribute to the host community, which is what makes it so great. So really that is your guiding light, is the mutual understanding through cultural exchange. And what does it mean to you to be a part of a community, and how might you use all of your skills and wonderful talents to promote mutual exchange and be an ambassador of sorts. So key selection factors, obviously you have to have an interest in the host country, number one, and alignment with the long-term plans. I think, actually, I'll pause here for just a second, because I know we have Dr. Stoff and Dr. Bhattacharya as well. I'd love to get your insights here on, especially when it comes to choosing a host country, because I know a lot of students, some places just look really fun and they'd want to be there for a year. But so what are some of the more compelling arguments for choosing a host country that you all have seen?
Well, I think the most important thing is to make sure it doesn't seem like you just took out a map and threw a dart at it. Some of the least compelling arguments are that you like the food, or you have some very sort of superficial connection to it. But I would say for more compelling reasons, ways that you can align it with the things that you are doing currently or that you seek to do in the future, and how the experience that you will have in that particular country will help to forward those goals that you have. But also just genuine intellectual curiosity is often quite good to express. So I'll stop there and see what Dr. Bhattacharya has to add to that.
I don't have that much more to add, but I think looking beyond the touristic descriptions that you might see online connected to some travel package, and trying to see a little bit, just research a little bit, read the Wikipedia article on the history and the politics, and just maybe do a Google search for current news items where that country name might pop up, just to get a little bit of a substantive idea of what's going on there, so you can talk about it in more than superficial terms, as Dr. Stoff was saying.
I will also just add very quickly that we did have a student who's just been awarded an ETA to Bulgaria, who came into the process not at all thinking that that would be the country that she would apply to. And after careful consideration and research, without having any previous knowledge or any previous connection to the place, made a compelling argument and was awarded. So it is possible to do that. Even so, if you're thinking right now, like, well, I don't really have any connections to any countries, or I don't really know how I would connect what I'm doing with a particular place, it is very possible to start at ground zero and work your way towards that.
Yeah, that's a great point. Dr. Mox and I like to play this game called the three things, where you take three of your interests and then you add the name of the country and see what comes up on Google, look at news articles, look at, what's happening. And you might be surprised to find something that you can kind of sink your teeth into and explore a little bit more about the country. I know when I was applying to Fulbright, one of my degrees was nonfiction creative writing. And I was between Brazil and Portugal. I had a lot more exposure to Brazil, and arguably probably a lot of reasons to do an ETA there. But something about Portugal just seemed really new. Obviously, I didn't know much about it because most of my undergraduate curriculum was very focused on Latin America. So I had to do some digging. I had to look at if there is creative writing, workshops or festivals or things like that. And wouldn't you know, Portugal has an amazing literary community, and it didn't take me that long to find it, right? Doesn't mean that I just wasn't exposed to it through my curriculum, but I had to do some digging, and I was able to make some really cool cases and connections between what I had learned about Latin America and Brazil, and Portugal. And I made my case for that, right? So we have so many stories like this, right? Of connections that you can make. And obviously, if you are at the beginning stages of choosing, even if you're interested in an ETA, just know that that's what ONSA is here for. We're here to have these kinds of conversations with you. We can have as many meetings with you as you like, as you kind of work through it. And since we are now in the spring, currently in at the end of March, you do have a little bit of time to really think about it and reflect on it. So just know that there's like a lot of different selection factors that come into play: language proficiency, community engagement, diversity in terms of geographic location, field of study, personal background, etc. So, you know, there are lots of countries that say we're looking for ETAs with a STEM background, or we're looking for ETAs with a journalism background, which is really exciting, right? They're not just looking for teaching majors. If you are, or you have a minor, or you have some teaching experience, that's amazing, right? But they don't need to import or they don't need to send US teachers to their country. They have teachers there, right? So it really is an ambassadorial program in that sense. Okay, so teaching experience is broadly defined by Fulbright. Things that count, I get that question. It's like, well, what counts as teaching experience? TA roles are great if you've worked, even if you've been working, you know, as a TA in a STEM field, for example, still counts. Doesn't matter if it's STEM, humanities, social sciences, whatever it might be. Tutoring, one-on-one or group, all subjects. Coaching of any sort. So maybe you're a coach for a sports team, debate team. Maybe you've had a leadership role for a sports, like a club team. That's really great. Mentorship roles are also wonderful of any sort. A lot of volunteer and leadership roles can also translate into teaching. And then, of course, any sort of formal classroom experience and training that you might have, like being TESOL certified or curriculum design, grading, et cetera, can be an added bonus, but it's not always required. And again, the country summary will tell you if they have a strong preference for that or if it's pretty open. Okay, so we say, you know, always check the preferences defined by the candidate profile first. Really, the readers are looking at the quality of teaching experience, the length of teaching experience, and the purpose and reasoning behind the teaching experience. I think, you know, it's, if you just have a bunch of little things, but they're not really connected, that's not necessarily a bad thing. But let's just say you worked with the same student over 4 years, mentoring them, maybe doing one-on-one tutoring, and you're able to speak to the growth that you've seen over the course of 4 years. That is hugely impactful, right? You don't have to necessarily be a TA for a 500-person lecture if you didn't really get a lot, you know, sink your teeth into a lot of that mentorship or growth or development of your students. So I always say quality over quantity. If you have a lot of teaching experience, wonderful. But we really are looking at the impact, right? In what ways can you speak to the growth of your students and connecting with your students? It's like Fulbright is really big on connection, right? So ways in which you've helped out your lab mates or your teammates or whatever that looks like, right? And we mentioned too, so you're only teaching like 20, 25 hours a week, and that's otherwise defined, but for the most part, it's usually part-time. And so you have a lot of flexibility in your grant to do community engagement work. So this part is essential to the Fulbright experience. And this was also a really great part of Fulbright. I really loved it. I think it also lends itself to so many majors, right? So maybe you're pre-med or you're global health and you have a desire to really work in communities and, you know, or public health even, work with some health outcomes. Like that could be a community engagement project. Maybe you love learning languages and you want to be auditing courses and expanding your language proficiency. That's also community engagement, right? Doing translation work, all of that stuff. So it's really broad. Reviewers really do consider the extracurricular activities and evidence of social consciousness, and everything's designed by you. And the interesting part about ETA is that you actually don't know where you're going to live, like the city in which you're going to be placed, until you accept your award and after the fact. So they know that it's going to be a bit broader. It's not going to be a research proposal in any way. So it should align with your interests. We say don't reinvent the wheel. You know, if you play a sport and you would be interested in coaching a sport or joining a league Maybe you're part of the choir here at ASU and you'd like to, start your own choir, or join an existing one, blend some musical genres. Like, really, the world is your oyster. It can be academic, professional, or it could just be for fun. So yeah, it's a blast. I think this is also one of the best parts about ETAs is the flexibility it gives you. And I think that's why we get a lot of students who are using it as a bridge year, between law school, medical school, going on to graduate school. It just gives them a lot of flexibility to work on different projects and really be a part of their community. For foreign language proficiency, many countries do not require any sort of foreign language proficiency. So if you haven't taken any, don't sweat it. You might look into Eastern Europe, Southeast Asia, and parts of Africa. Many of those do not require foreign language proficiency, although obviously it is a bonus. It's always indicated in the candidate profile very clearly. So if you have any confusion on like recommended or required, what like the differences between that, we're happy to kind of chat with you further in an advising appointment. And so having conversational ability, and even if you speak a language that isn't related to the host country, you absolutely should still include it in your Fulbright application. There will be a portion in there for you to mention any languages that you speak, right? So I've had plenty of students who are native Spanish speakers, but maybe they're going to Southeast Asia. They still want to mention that they are fluent in multiple languages, because it just shows the reviewers that you are familiar with navigating other cultures. And it just gives us a complete picture of you as an applicant as well. So we always tell students having languages, no matter their relevance to the host country, is always good to include, because otherwise the readers won't know. Okay, so I want to give two examples of students who did not necessarily have teaching degrees as their background, and just kind of, I took snippets from their applications in terms of their community project and their plans upon the US. So they're kind of like these short abstracts. This student actually had a background in journalism and was really passionate about photojournalism and the arts. And so they applied at the time to the Palestinian territories, and their community project was about photojournalism. So as a trans-border photojournalist and artist, I plan on using different forms of creative expression like film, photography, and creative writing to ignite important dialogues about ethno-nationalism, religion, and politics. These conversations could help communicate ideas and emotions between people to ensure peace and stability, right? Plans upon return to the US. After completing an English teaching assistantship, I will pursue a master's in international affairs with a focus on human rights and peace and conflict management. I will continue my work in refugee and migrant issues with the US State Department. I also plan on continue using photojournalism to promote storytelling and understanding. So this student did not, again, reinvent the wheel in terms of a community project. They were just very firmly grounded in the things that they've already done at ASU. They'd done a couple of photojournalism projects. They had traveled throughout the Caribbean. They had maybe done a study abroad to do stuff like that. And so, like I mentioned, this is not anything too crazy, but it was very aligned with what they wanted to do. And their plans upon returning from their Fulbright was not to teach necessarily, right? They were planning on going to graduate school and work for the State Department and some other things. So yeah, when I say the world is your oyster, I really mean it. I also love this one too. So this student was an accounting student from WP Carey, and they ended up applying to Estonia. So her community project says, I will engage with my Estonian community in ways that combine my service and business. In addition to exploring Estonia's versatile artistic heritage, I will volunteer in my community, likely at a women's shelter. I'll also hold community workshops to develop the soft skills used in the United States business culture. As a lifelong dancer, I'm excited to take Estonian folk dance classes and attend the Sido Folk Festival to celebrate Estonia's strong national identity rooted in the arts. And then their plans upon return. I will earn a PhD in accounting and teach at a university. Therefore, being an ETA is an essential next step in developing as an educator and communicator to international business students. I will research the effect of global taxation systems, a topic in which Estonia is noteworthy, given the nation's revolutionary digital taxation system, reporting 3.0. My experience as an ETA in Estonia will provide me with culturally sensitive perspective as I contextualize the system in my research. So Dr. Stoff and Dr. Bhattacharya, what kind of stands out to you about this particular example, being a non-teaching major applying to ETA?
Well, first of all, I think this applicant has done a fabulous job of demonstrating that they have knowledge of the country, that they're familiar with aspects of the culture, and they recognize that the country is a leader in the particular area that they're interested in, and then has connected that to their long-term goal. So therefore demonstrating that the value of the program will be beyond just having a mutual cultural exchange experience, but also will help them to further their professional goals. So I think in that sense, they've done a fantastic job of kind of hitting all of those points that we want to see students hit on.
I'm really impressed by their actually talking about getting into the community and really connecting with people through dance. It's one thing when you say, I want to learn about food, or I want to sort of visit this place. But this person is really talking about volunteering, women's shelter. They're talking about dancing, very sort of direct sort of collaborations and connections that this person will be making. Thanks.
I also think it's really wonderful that the student, rather than saying, I'm going to share something that I know that I believe that, you know, the Estonians will benefit from, they are sort of deferring to the fact that the Estonians are actually much more expert in certain areas, and therefore they have a lot to learn from being in that country.
Yeah, and there's the community project has a couple of different things. It's not just one, right? They want to take Estonian folk dance, which is very like curiosity based. Like I would like to learn. Because they come from a business background, and of course the rest of their application talks about how they've already hosted things like community workshops that is feasible for them to do if that's, you know, available to them. And also working with women was something that this applicant felt very strongly about, having done like microloans and stuff like that, for women entrepreneurs. So again, not reinventing the wheel, nothing fancy, gives about like a sentence or two of each thing. And it gives the reader a good idea, a good sense of like, wow, they're pretty flexible in what they might do, but it seems very feasible that they could do this given their previous experience. And yeah, I love the talking about the reporting 3.0. That is something when I was working with this student, I was like, well, what about Estonia's, you know, taxation system? And it's so great. If you're an accounting major, tell me more about that. She's like, well, I don't know. Let me go find out. And that came up and she's like, oh, this is a great reason. And, you know, added it in. So again, she didn't come to our office with these connections already. We kind of built that together as we were exploring her options for different countries and, you know, looking at country profiles and stuff. So again, this is a very ongoing process and conversation in terms of choosing your country. Some students know right away exactly what they want, but if you don't worry about it because, you know, we're here to help. So just remember, you know, ETA grants are well suited for those who are seeking to develop new skills and sharpening existing ones. You are given a lot of freedom to think outside of the box in terms of like looking at your resume and skills and how that might apply. ETA grants are great for those who have multiple majors, interests, or talents they want to share with their host community. You know, I've had a lot of students who are like a math major who plays guitar and also has a sustainability minor. Like, you can put it all together in a Fulbright app, and that often is what makes it very compelling. So your diverse interests are a strength in the Fulbright world. So don't feel like you have to be in one lane in order to apply to something like an ETA. And at the end of the day, we're looking for folks, and Fulbright are looking for folks who are flexible, curious, and eager to promote cultural exchange. Again, just really being embedded in the community and being a part of it, however that might look like. So I'm going to introduce Wen. This is the more exciting part, of course. And we have a couple questions for Wen as well, but feel free, anyone in the chat, if you have questions, throw it in and we'll be happy to answer it. So Wen, do you mind introducing yourself to the group?
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Katie. Hi, everyone. My name is Wen, and I went to Arizona State University and then went on a Fulbright grant to Mongolia in 2023. So my grant date was like January to January. So like the entire year of 2023, I was in Mongolia. I was placed at a university in the capital city, but had opportunities in the summer and on the weekends to kind of branch out and involve myself in other ways outside of just the capital and the university. So yeah.
Cool. So if you don't mind, how'd you decide on ETA and what key experience did you think, made your application strong?
Well, I had some teaching experience in university that I really enjoyed. Also, the research and ETA applications are different, and so that's also a component. But I think that the components that were probably the most applicable, well, for the ETA grant itself, I had like some teaching experiences to draw on through like tutoring or working at the university or working in student-facing roles and things like that, and just having a general interest in education. And then I would say specifically to Mongolia, one of the things that was on the program page on the site, on the State Department site, was that they were looking for someone that, I think the word that they used was like industrious. So they were kind of looking for someone that where like going to Mongolia wouldn't be their first time abroad. And I think that that also like matched me appropriately, where I kind of emphasized that I was prepared sort of mentally and also just skills wise to live in Mongolia and commit myself to that type of role.
Yeah, and Dr. Stoff and Dr. Bhattacharya, if you have any questions for Wen, feel free to hop in there as well. That's great. Were you considering any other countries outside of Mongolia, or did you know right away that that was the country you were going to apply to?
So I was looking at countries. So when I was studying political science at Arizona State, my research sort of interest in like sort of my impetus for poli-sci was migration studies. So I was kind of looking at countries where migration was something that was relevant and something that I could learn about on the ground. So I was looking at some countries and exploring options in East Africa or Southeast Asia, or and then of course Mongolia and a few other places. So everything kind of aligned though with Mongolia because that was a country that I was studying in university. It also had the dates that were the most like fitting to kind of the calendar that I wanted to depart on. So I graduated in the winter. So I graduated in December, and then the grant started in January. So that just really fit as well.
Yeah. So sorry, Katie. Because I was very much involved in your process of applying and was on the Fulbright Day committee that interviewed you. And since you mentioned before this kind of idea that Mongolia was looking for someone who could handle the physical as well as the intellectual challenges, maybe you could comment a little bit more about how you demonstrated that, because I think that is something that a lot of students often don't think about when they're applying to countries, is like, well, the standard of living is going to be quite different. Am I okay with not having hot water every day or not having internet access every day? And I even remember on your committee interview, one of the members of the committee, an older gentleman, was a little concerned about you as a young woman going to this place, and you did a wonderful job assuaging those concerns.
Yeah, thanks, Dr. Stoff, for saying that. And great memory. I'm glad that that we still have that connection there. But yes, I think that to Dr. Stoff's point, that there's sort of, oops, sorry, my light just turned off. But I guess I had a genuine level of preparedness, I think, and I explained that well. I think that because what I was saying was authentic, it sort of prepared me adequately for actually living there. So I think that in the long, like sort of reflective way, I'm like, oh, I'm really glad that I had those experiences to kind of help me in time in the moments where things were, to be honest, not great all the time. Like there's definitely ups and downs. But specifically to the sort of applying process, I think that some of the things that I referenced was, well, I had like a really great curiosity. I'm really open, and there's like a lot of enthusiasm for me to have this experience, like number one. And then secondary to that, I have kind of these concrete examples to draw on to kind of indicate that I'm like prepared and that I'm meeting the points that they want, and that they want someone that's flexible and someone that's sort of, I guess, open-minded, and also someone that can essentially adapt quickly in unfamiliar environments and comfortable environments. And yeah, so I'd like lived abroad when I was a kid. I'd been abroad, like I studied abroad and traveled a bit. So yeah.
Yeah, so for our students in the group that may not want to be teachers after their grants, I guess I'm curious to just hear about your grants experience as a whole, but also like what skills from being in the classroom and teaching through your ETA do you think are transferable to other contexts?
Well, I think Katie, you can probably speak to this as well since you're also an ETA. But I would say that teachers have a lot of patience and they're also really able to kind of handle a lot of balls in the air. So really able to kind of move with curveballs and such. I would say additional to that, that I think teachers also, like as a teacher and after having this experience, I kind of noticed that I'm really interested in helping people learn in kind of the workplace. And I'm also really interested in learning myself. So I think that having that level of um, sort of like modesty, I guess, and like stepping into a position and being like, there are things that I don't know and things that I want to learn and things that I want to share and things that kind of everything in between. I think that being able to communicate that, at least like in my job search process after returning to the US, sort of benefited.
Oh yeah, ETAs are we're professionals in improvisation. Like I remember getting a tour of my school and then they were like, "Hey, do you want to teach this class?" Like they literally just pulled me into a class on my first day to teach a group of business students and they're like, "Oh yeah, business English, go." And I'm like, okay. And there was like 30 people in this class, right? Yeah, ETAs, I think it does help with the public speaking. I think it helps a lot with the connection of like getting to know people really quickly. Obviously, you're humbled in many ways. But you get really good at becoming a conduit. I like to say, like you're a connector between people. And I think teachers are very good at that, but also just ETAs in general. Um, it's a really good skill set to have. If you work in a couple of different industries, if you're working in STEM, being able to communicate with others and connect with others on the research that you're doing and the impact that it has is really, really important. I joke that I'm bilingual in a lot of languages, and sometimes it's like English to English, right? Going across disciplines or going between academia and nonprofit settings, whatever that is. And I think experiences like Fulbright really set you up for success in a lot of ways that even now, I think it's been, oh my gosh, over 6 years now, 6 years since I've done my Fulbright. And I'm still, reaping a lot of the rewards of having gone abroad through the program. So I'd love to hear about your community engagement project too. Did you end up doing what you originally proposed, or what did that look like?
Okay, so kind of yes and no. So my community engagement project was essentially like, oh, I was trying to connect the fact that I have like family from different parts of the US, and also that I have an aunt that's like a van lifer. And so I was like, oh, maybe I'll like connect and create a through line there and be like, oh, there's like many different parts of the US similar to Mongolia, and try to draw some connections there. Essentially, like I tried that and like the students really didn't like it. Like they weren't that interested at all. But I ended up kind of pivoting and sort of seeing what they wanted. And kind of what they wanted was a lot of just connections to a foreign presence in general. And I think too that they really appreciated like an American style of teaching. So I think that that's sort of where I was trying to engage with students in a special way, is really bring a lot of like American aspects to the classroom. But I guess like the photo on the top on your screen, like the top right, is like a summer camp that I was at. I was there for about a week. And I kind of actually was able to like go around to different provinces in Mongolia and get outside of the like quote unquote like big city and like meet more students and sort of introduce them to different like aspects of American culture and also like American programs. Because a lot of students are just curious about, and a lot of people in general are just really curious about how to essentially access the same resources that the US offers. So that was something that I was sort of interested in, and that kind of eventually became my community project is, oh, how do we essentially, or how do like foreigners in Mongolia sort of create channels for Mongolians to access, again, like kind of the somewhat of like an, I guess like a same quality of resources that the US can offer.
Yeah, no, I think that's so key that it is ongoing. It just kind of transforms and takes the shape of what your community needs. And I think that's when you're writing your proposal, the readers understand that you don't truly know what your community needs until you're embedded in it and you're traveling and you're getting to know and having conversations about that. I think that's the open secret with Fulbright applications is that your community project that you propose is probably going to look a lot different than what you thought it would be. Um, I remember, I think I proposed something like translation, because, I had the language proficiency, so I wanted to do some translation. I did ended up doing some translation work, but it ended up being Portuguese to English, which was new for me. I'd never done that. I was also just like, I would just hang around the international office of my university when I didn't have teaching hours. And I would just be like, hey, let me translate some documents for you. And they'd be like, okay, great. So there's a lot of flexibility in the ETA. And a lot of it is just you have to be present, you have to be physically there to get those kinds of opportunities and have those kinds of conversations, which I think is really cool. Um, I'd love to hear just a little bit also what you're up to now. You mentioned a little bit before coming back from your grant. How has that been returning? Any culture shock? And yeah, what are you up to? Nope. We might have lost her for a second. She's coming back. So, there we go. Hey, Wen.
Hi, sorry about that.
No problem. Did you get my question before it cut out?
Is it just the next one on the list?
Yeah, we just love to hear a little bit what you're up to now and how has the post-grad experience been like?
Oh, yeah. So, well, right now, so I'm originally from Arizona, and then being away from home for a year kind of made me really homesick. I'd actually say I was homesick for most of the grant, and now I'm back in Arizona, also back at ASU. So I have like a full-time staff position at ASU, and that's kind of what I've been up to since returning in January. And loving life and still have a lot of connections though to Mongolia, which is great. Like a lot of students like messaging me on Facebook saying, "Hi teacher, where are you?" Like, sorry. Or like, "Hi teacher, can you read this?" Or, "Hi teacher, write me a recommendation letter in 2 days." Like a lot of those kinds of things. So yeah, but anyways, yeah.
I love to hear that. Yeah, getting the messages from your students, but that's a great sign too that you really connected with them. And because students are brutal. Like if they don't like you, they'll tell you. They won't give you the time of day, right? So it's very true. Is there anything else you would like to share with the group, just in general? Any funny memories or things that kind of come up that you're like, wow, that was a very Fulbright moment from your experience?
Oh gosh, there's so many things. I mean, I'm sure Katie, you can relate. And like, if we like any cocktail, like we're ready. We have our stories prepped. Like, you know what I mean? Any like dinner party, we're ready. Like, we've got stories for days. I think that one of the things that maybe came up that was unexpected in Mongolia was that the research that I did online really didn't cover the full scope of what living in Mongolia would be like. So I think that it depends, of course, like which country. I would say that Mongolia, relative to Portugal, is like maybe a little different. But essentially, I think that one of the things that I would recommend is if you're really serious about like moving abroad for a year and living abroad for a year, kind of being away from the US and things like that, for kind of that amount of time, especially immediately after graduating college, to connect with people that are living there, either like an expat community that's in the country that you're wanting to visit, or someone within your community itself. I didn't realize how much like of a resource Facebook is. I would say that Facebook though is an excellent way to kind of connect and get information that maybe you're looking for that isn't purely related to your application and isn't purely related to like the experiences that you need, the skills that you want to emphasize, and sort of the like deliverables that you want to hit in that regard. I think that if you're looking more for more information about sort of the day-to-day and sort of the like more personal aspects of living abroad and being an expat and kind of moving into like uncomfortable spaces right after graduating college. But anyway.
Yeah, that is a huge piece of advice that we tell any student thinking. And then this is just good advice for life, right? Talk to people who have a job that you want, or have a fellowship or scholarship that you're interested in. And that's one of the best ways to look at fit, to hear about their experiences if it's something that you think would align. Fulbright, we have a big alumni network at ASU. Fulbright also has a grantee directory directly on their website. And again, y'all are coming at a very early time. And if you're in the spring thinking about Fulbright, you've given yourself enough cushion to explore and talk to people from a couple of different grant types in a couple of different countries. I always get a lot of LinkedIn messages around the summer, this time of year, of students who find me randomly on the Fulbright website and say, hey, I'm interested in applying to Portugal. Can I pick your brain about it? And I'm always happy to do it. And I find that Fulbrighters in general are always very excited to talk about their grants. Like you said, when we have lots of stories to tell, and we get excited when we have a captive audience to tell them. So yeah, take advantage of the generosity of Fulbrighters in general. I find that the cohort of Fulbrighters is very open to sharing about their grant experiences, in addition to reading things like blogs and stuff, but there's no replacement for human connection. So take advantage of that. I think that's a great piece of advice. And it's just good for life too, like you can apply to a job on Glassdoor or through LinkedIn, but realistically, you won't really know what it's like working there until you talk to someone who's been there and can attest like, oh yeah, the bosses are good or time off is good, like all of these kinds of factors that lead into a positive grant experience. Any final thoughts, Wen, before we chat about logistics and whatnot?
Yeah, I think I'm good. Thanks, Katie.
Okay. Well, thank you so much for sharing all your wisdom with us, Wen. And it's lovely that you're back at ASU too. So if any of y'all in the chat or watching at home apply to Mongolia, you never know. Wen might be in your Fulbright committee reading your application, which would be very exciting. Well, you never know. We might be able to recruit you, Wen, for one of our Fulbright days. Okay, so the application timeline, just so we have a kind of idea of where we're at. Obviously, we have Fulbright Day that just passed. The Fulbright app is going to open early next week. And then there's this big, long section between April through August that you can be working on your application. We strongly encourage you to start now, do an intake appointment now, especially if you are considering different types of grants, different types of countries. This is the perfect time to be exploring that with an ONSA advisor. And yes, we are open and available during the summer. We do a lot of work over the summer with our students where we're doing intake meetings, drafting, revising. It's okay if you're traveling the world, if you're on a study abroad, if you have an internship. We often work with students as they're traveling throughout the summer. So whether you're in Arizona or around the world, like I've zoomed with people from Africa, literally on their Peace Corps missions, to working on their Fulbright application. So we make ourselves very available to you. We encourage you to take advantage of that. The ASU campus deadline is in September. So you will this is kind of like your dress rehearsal. And yes, you do have to submit a full application letters of recommendation included by this campus deadline. So even though the Fulbright website will have a couple of dates in October, if you're applying through ASU, just keep it in your brain. September is the time to apply. And August is obviously a very crazy month for everyone as we're coming back to the fall, moving back, all of that. So this is why we say start early, talk to us as soon as you can. You know, even if you meet with us in March and then our next meeting is until May, we would prefer that instead of showing up in August for your first meeting ever, right? So that's the ideal time to be working on the application. I know that's a little bit different from what you might be used to, but again, we're here to help you out. So your next step from here, obviously, is to create an intake meeting. You can go directly to our website, onsa.asu.edu, and there will be a button there where you can make an appointment. It'll say schedule an appointment. And everything is organized by the award type. So the nice part about intake meetings is that they are exploratory. So you could do an intake for the ETA, where we will go a little bit more into the country profiles and kind of decode those together as a group. And then you could also do an intake award for the research and like a study research award, if you'd like. And that's the nice part. So then eventually when you choose one, you'll just kind of continue on that track. But for intakes, you're welcome to do as many intakes as you'd like. They're largely exploratory. And so you can schedule separate intakes to explore your option depending on the grant types. And just note, intakes are in small group settings, so it's no more than 3 to 4 students. What we do is we just ask that you come prepared to discuss your list of countries that you're thinking about, your motivations for applying, and any other questions that you might have about the process. So as always, you can access all of our ONSA stuff, onsa.asu.edu. We have a tab on our website, but the shortcut for that is fulbright.asu.edu. So you can look, review at the key dates and stuff like that. And then you're welcome to also look at the Fulbright US student site, which is where you can look at the award search, the country profiles, and all of the data. I do see one question in the chat before we head out. And if anyone else has questions, feel free to throw them in the chat now. But we have a question about when to matriculate in graduate school after the year abroad and following the calendar year. So in terms of timing, Fulbright is very similar to graduate school, right? So if you're a rising senior this year, you'll be starting your senior year in the fall. You're applying to Fulbright to go typically the following fall, or, you know, depending on the country, it may be that following January. So you're always applying the year before. I know a lot of Fulbrighters will start applying to graduate programs like law schools or what have you during their Fulbright grant, or they'll have those materials ready to go to submit during their Fulbright grant so that when they're finished with the grant, they can continue on to graduate programs. So hopefully that makes sense and clarifies things. But a lot of students will do that if they get it. A lot of students apply to graduate programs while they're applying to Fulbright. So if they don't get a Fulbright, they do that, which is very common. Also, you know, if you're applying to Fulbright, you probably have a lot of other things going on. And we encourage you to have a lot of options as well. Any final questions before we head out? Okay.
I don't know if, sorry, Katie.
Yeah.
But I don't know if this was, since I like dropped off, like the chat message isn't there, but if the person is asking about return, like wanting to do a master's after the Fulbright, so say your grant, like for instance, like my grant ends in January, and say my program was supposed to start in December, and it's like, oh, was there going to be like issue there? Like say the program ends in September and every grad program starts in August. At least like what happened with ours, because that was a situation with a Fulbrighter that was in like my cohort, I guess, is that it ends up being a situation where you don't necessarily have to ask like you have to kind of get approval from your school and like okay, so there's no bad blood there. But in terms of like getting approvals or not, it's really a decision on your part of whether you want to have your stipend deducted. So like the way that they kind of calculate your pay is like the number of days you're in country. So like if you leave the country early, then essentially that like gets deducted from your pay. So that's kind of like a note there as well, just so people are in the know and like just to be transparent about the sort of finance aspect of the grant.
Yeah, that's super helpful. Yeah, thank you, Wen. Okay. Well, if there's no other questions, thank you all again for joining us today. This meeting is recorded, so it will be available on our YouTube page. You can access that through ONSA and everything. Thank you again to all my colleagues, to Wen. Big shout out to Kai. Thank you for organizing our Fulbright Fridays and being the backbone of our office as always. So, and thank you to our students for joining us on a Friday. So we hope to see you soon in an intake, and we can't wait to chat with you about your country choice and grant choice. So we'll see you soon. Thanks, everyone.